Hello, St. Mary. This is Father DiTomo, and I've been asked during this time, hey, Father, how do we use our Catholic faith to help us discern how we will vote in the elections? Okay, so I want to give a video on this. I wrote a bulletin article. This is going to be brief. I want to hit the high points, but I read a document called Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship. It's by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. You can find it on their website, usccb.org. It's a long document. It's got a lot of information on different issues. I'm not going to go through all those issues in this video. I'm just going to give you an overview about things. The first thing is it talks about what are the principles, the main principles of Catholic social teaching that can help us. Because see, the church doesn't tell us who to vote for, but the church helps us to form our consciences so we can vote in accordance with the truth that comes from God, right? So first we look at the first social teaching principle is the dignity of the human person. And that's basically this. Every human person is made in the image of God and has inherent dignity that can never be taken away, okay? It's so important. It's one of the central teachings of our Catholic social teaching tradition. The next principle is the common good, and the common good is the sum total of social conditions that allow people to live and reach their fulfillment. So the common good includes things like, of course, having access to food and shelter and education and employment, healthcare, religious freedom, all these things, okay? They're all factor into the common good. Subsidiarity. It's important to know too, like we're not just concerned about our individual good, but the common good of all people in our society. Okay, subsidiarity. What does subsidiarity teach? The principle of subsidiarity is that a community of a higher order should not interfere with a community of a lower order. Let me explain that a little bit. A community of a higher order, like for example, the federal government should not try to do something that is really the proper domain of a municipality, for example, or of the family, right? The family unit is a lower community. It's a community of a lower order. The family should do certain things that the family is meant to do. And then we have the higher orders like the federal government. They should do things that they're created to do. All right. Solidarity is the last principle. And the principle of solidarity basically recognizes the fact that more and more in our world today, people are interdependent, right? And so we're not just concerned for our own good, but also for our neighbor's good, right? And we also remember that we're especially concerned for the needs of those who are most vulnerable, the needs of the poor, for example. They are our brothers and sisters. We're in this world together, right? And so we need to be concerned about others as well. That's solidarity, to be in solidarity with others. That's part of what we're called to be. Now here's the thing, a person doesn't really need to be Catholic to see the wisdom of these principles, right? Now, Catholics form their consciences based on the dictates of reason and the Word of God and the teaching of the Catholic Church. Now, we have these, then we look at the issues, right? But when we take these principles, we want to apply them to the issues. And we have to use prudence when we do that, right? What is the virtue of prudence? That is the virtue that allows us to discern our true good in every circumstance and to choose the right means of achieving it. So if we want to respect the dignity of the human person on a certain issue, then we have to ask, okay, how do we go about preserving the dignity of the human person? What are the policies that we have or the laws that we have that do that in the proper way? That's the virtue of prudence. Okay, so just to go through some of the issues that this document covers, I had them all written down here. So let's start by looking at the dignity of human life. We respect the dignity of the human person. That means we have to look at war in a certain way. War should only be waged as a last resort, for example. This is just being real brief with all these issues, okay? But it's obviously that war should be a last resort. The death penalty or capital punishment, really, when you read the catechism, it says that the death penalty should only be in use when it is really the only way to defend a society from a dangerous individual. And really, in modern times, this justification really isn't there anymore. So we need to move beyond the death penalty in our world today. Healthcare, right? we need to find a way to provide decent health care for people. It's not enough for someone just to be alive. They need to have access to proper health care. Again, prudence is a question of how do we allow for that, but we do recognize that it's a good goal, right? That we all agree about. Okay. See, we can disagree about the ways we try to achieve those goods, but we do recognize that it's a good to have access to health care. Poverty and homelessness, that's something we should fight. Again, the principle of solidarity. Those who are poor, we have to try to bring them out of that state of poverty. It's something we're called to do as a society and as a people. Education, everyone has a right to a good education, but also with the principle of subsidiarity, parents should have a say in the education that their children have, right? That's important. Look at work. Workers are entitled to a just wage because of human dignity, but also to not have to face unjust discrimination, things like that. Racism is an offense against human dignity, right? And it's an intrinsic evil, and it's something that has no place in a civilized society. We should resist racism where we see it in our culture. We should try to eradicate it. While every nation has its right to regulate its national borders, the church does teach this, right? Every nation has a right to control and regulate its borders. At the same time, we do have a need to welcome those who can come into our country out of need and also can contribute their gifts to the common good. So the question is, how can we allow for legal immigration while also maintaining security for our country? We have to find a better way to get that system right. That's an important issue. The environment, we should practice good stewardship of the environment, right? Because the world we have is God's gift to us, and we have to be good stewards of it, not just for ourselves, but for the future generations to come. All right. Religious freedom is essential. Where would we be without religious freedom? It is essential. Marriage, we need to support marriage and family. Marriage as the institution of one man and one woman in a lifelong institution, because the complementarity of the sexes is a gift that benefits children, right? And so we need to protect that. We need to support marriage in that way. All right. Now, these are all just different issues. We also know we cannot be just one issue voters. We can't just pick one of these issues and say, this is the only issue I care about, right? That's true. These are all connected. But it's also important to point out that the church and the bishops in this document, they're emphatic many, many times about protecting the fundamental right to life. And they give this analogy too. They say, if the human person were considered to be like a building or like a house, as St. Paul says, then they said, look, all these issues, they are like the walls and the roof, and they're all important, right? But if you don't have the foundation, which is life, the right to life, it doesn't matter how good your walls are, it doesn't matter how good your roof is. You don't have a house that can stand without the foundation. So the bishops say, the threat of abortion, and before I go on, I do want to say this too. Anytime I speak about abortion, I want people to know, if you hear that word and it's a hard word to hear because maybe in your own life, this hits close to home because maybe you or someone you know has had an abortion or has been involved in one, please know that God wants you to have healing and he wants you to experience his mercy, right? And the church wants that for you too. So if this is something that's hard for you to hear, come meet with me, come meet with a priest, talk with a priest, pray with a priest about it, right? Because we want you to have healing. This is a hard issue, it's an emotional issue, but it's also an important issue. We gotta talk about it in our world today. The church says this, the threat of abortion, the bishops say, the threat of abortion remains our preeminent priority. That's important. Of all these issues, that is our preeminent priority. Why? Because it directly attacks life itself. Because abortion, takes place within the sanctuary of the family, which is supposed to be the most intimate community there is in our lives. And also because of the number of lives destroyed, right? Estimated about 60 million lives lost through abortion since 1973. And to say nothing of the lives of those who've been wounded by abortion. But those who've lost their lives, 60 million. Okay, since the Roe versus Wade in 1973. The church, we know this, that scientific advances have demonstrated time and time again that life begins at conception. We know this. Maybe we didn't know it as well in the 1970s. It's clear now. Every medical textbook says this now. So when politicians make appeals to women's reproductive health or allowing people to make choices over their own body, those phrases gloss over the obvious fact that we're talking about not one human person, not one body, but two bodies, right? Two persons. The church teaches that, and this is from the Catechism, paragraph 2271, the church teaches that direct abortion, that is to say, abortion willed either as an end or as a means, is gravely contrary to the moral law. The church further teaches that the inalienable right to life of every innocent human individual is a constitutive element of a civil society and its legislation. We also know embryonic stem cell research and human cloning and euthanasia. These are also, I didn't write down euthanasia, but these are also intrinsic evils that are deep, grave threats to the dignity of the human person. So here's the deal. This is how I look at things, okay? When I'm considering how I'm going to vote and I look at the issues, I say if somebody is wrong on the issue of life, they lose my vote. Because if they get this wrong, if they are wrong about if they miss the truth of the dignity of the human person from conception, I can't trust them to be right on these other issues. I can't even trust them to really see the dignity of the human person in these other issues because they're wrong right off the bat. So let's continue to pray. Let's continue to see. I will say that the life issue is the fundamental human right issue of our time, just as slavery was in the 19th century in the United States. Now, abortion, the life issue, is the central human rights issue that we have to grapple with. And so let's continue to pray for each other. I know not everyone's going to agree with everything I've said in this video. There's a whole lot more I could say about all these issues, but let's continue to pray for each other and let's ask God for the wisdom to make the right choices.